My husband told me, I am going to my mistress. I am done with you. If you try to stop me, I will call the police and say you attacked me. I let him walk away broken and silent. But Karma had other plans. Days later he came back, desperate and ruined, regretting everything. I stood by the doorway, gripping the cold brass handle as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. My husband, no, the man I had given my life to, was packing his bags. Not in a fit of rage, not in the heat of an argument, but with the calm efficiency of someone who had planned this moment long before I even suspected a thing. You heard me, he said, his voice void of hesitation. I'm leaving. I'm going to my mistress. Mistress. The word sliced through my chest like a blade, but I didn't flinch. My body had gone numb, my mind trapped in a slow-motion nightmare where everything looked real but felt impossible. He zipped up his suitcase, straightened his shirt, and finally, looked at me. There was no guilt in his eyes, no flicker of hesitation. Just the smug confidence of a man who believed he was making the smartest move of his life. I am done with you, he continued, adjusting the watch on his wrist. The same watch I had gifted him on our anniversary last year. My stomach twisted. I'm not asking for permission. If you try to stop me, if you even think about making this difficult, I will call the police and tell them you attacked me. A hollow laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. I wasn't a violent woman. I wasn't even the kind to raise my voice in arguments. The idea of me attacking him was as ridiculous as the situation unfolding in front of me. But the way he said it, so calculated, so rehearsed, made my blood turn cold. He meant it. He would do it. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just some midlife crisis where he wanted a younger woman to boost his ego. He had planned this. He had waited for the right moment, the perfect excuse, the best way to leave me in the dust while making sure he came out looking clean. I should have screamed at him. I should have thrown the nearest object at his head. But I didn't. I just watched. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating, but he didn't seem to care. He picked up his bag and walked past me, brushing against my shoulder like I was nothing more than a stranger in his way. At the threshold he hesitated for the first time. Maybe he expected me to crumble. To beg. To fall to my knees and plead for him to stay. Maybe he wanted to see me break so he could walk away feeling even more powerful. But I gave him nothing. I met his gaze, steady and unwavering, and let him see the void where my love for him used to be. Something flickered in his expression. Annoyance, perhaps. Frustration that I wasn't reacting the way he expected. But he recovered quickly, shaking his head as if I were the foolish one for not trying to stop him. And then, with a smirk that made my stomach churn, he walked out. The sound of the front door closing behind him was deafening. It echoed through the walls, through my chest, through the hollow space where my heart used to be. For a long moment I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, staring at the door as if it might open again, as if this might all rewind and I'd wake up to find it was just a cruel dream. But the silence stretched on. And that's when it hit me. He was gone. Not for a work trip. Not for a weekend with friends. Not for a temporary fight where he'd come back with flowers and empty apologies. Gone. And I had let him go. Not because I was weak. Not because I didn't love him enough to fight for him. But because something deep inside me whispered that this was the beginning of something bigger. That maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of my story. It was the start of his. And Karma wasn't going to let him get away that easily. I walked slowly through the empty house, my feet making soft, deliberate sounds against the hardwood floors. Everything looked the same yet different. The furniture, the photos on the wall, the dishes in the sink. All remnants of a life that had shattered in a matter of minutes. I made my way to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the space he used to occupy. My hands rested on the soft fabric of the sheets, fingers pressing into the material as if I could still feel the warmth of the man who had just walked away. But there was nothing. Just emptiness. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. I wasn't sure. At some point my body moved on its own. I stood up, walked to the closet and pulled open the doors. His side was empty now. Vacant hangers swaying slightly from where he had ripped his clothes away in a hurry. And then my gaze fell on a single shirt he had forgotten. A dark blue button-down, slightly wrinkled from where it had been shoved to the back. I reached for it, running my fingers over the fabric, breathing in the faint scent of his cologne. And then without hesitation I walked to the bathroom and threw it into the trash. One by one I searched for every little thing of his that remained. His spare toothbrush, his half-used cologne bottle, the socks he always left scattered in the drawer. Gone. Piece by piece I erased him. Not because I hated him. Not because I wanted to pretend he never existed. But because I refused to let a ghost of a man linger in my home. When I was done, I stood in front of the mirror, expecting to see a broken woman staring back at me. Instead I saw someone else. A woman who had just lost everything. And yet for the first time in years, she felt free. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know if the pain would hit me like a storm or if the loneliness would creep in when I least expected it. But I knew one thing. He thought he had won tonight. But karma was just getting started. And I couldn't wait to watch it unfold. I stood in front of the mirror longer than I should have. The reflection staring back at me was both familiar and foreign. A woman I recognized but couldn't quite place. She wasn't crying. Her face wasn't contorted in pain. She wasn't clutching her chest or gasping for air. She was just still. The silence in the house was suffocating, thick with the absence of the man who had walked out without hesitation. The echoes of his last words still lingered, but they no longer held weight. If anything, they felt like a distant echo, something that belonged to a different life. I turned away from the mirror and walked into the kitchen, flipping on the light. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. I opened a cabinet and grabbed a glass, filling it with water. My fingers trembled slightly as I lifted it to my lips, but I didn't spill a drop. I took a slow sip, letting the coolness spread through my body, grounding me. And then the strangest thing happened. I laughed. Not because anything was funny. Not because I had suddenly found peace in my situation. But because the absurdity of it all hit me like a wave. My husband had just abandoned me in the cruelest way possible. Humiliating me, threatening me, walking out with the confidence of a man who believed he had won. And yet, standing here alone in my quiet house, I realized something. I didn't lose anything. He did. He lost a wife who had been loyal through every storm. A partner who had built a life with him, who had sacrificed, compromised, and loved him even when he didn't deserve it. And what had he left me for? A woman I knew nothing about. I set the glass down and leaned against the counter, staring at the spot where he had stood just hours ago, hurling his cruel words at me like daggers. The way he had said it, so arrogantly, so sure of himself, sent a chill down my spine. He thought he had found something better. That's when the curiosity started creeping in. Who was she? I had never suspected an affair, never noticed any changes in his behavior. There were no late nights, no secret phone calls, no sudden shifts in how he treated me. Or maybe I had been too blind to see it. I pulled my phone from my pocket and hesitated. Did I really want to know? Did it matter? But something inside me burned for answers. Not because I wanted him back. Not even close. But because I wanted to understand how I had missed the signs. I opened social media and typed his name into the search bar. Nothing unusual. Just his regular posts. Work updates, a vacation photo from months ago, and a couple of pictures of us that now felt like artifacts from another life. Then I checked the comments. And that's when I saw her name. It was subtle, buried beneath casual likes and well wishes from friends and colleagues. But it was there. A woman I had never met before, leaving small, seemingly innocent comments on his posts. A laughing emoji on one of his jokes. A simple "looks fun" under a picture from a work trip. Harmless on the surface. But I knew better now. I clicked on her profile, my stomach tightening as I scrolled through her photos. She was beautiful. Dark hair, striking eyes, the kind of woman who turned heads in a crowded room. Her pictures told a story. Lavish vacations, expensive dinners, designer clothes. And then I saw it. A photo of the two of them. It wasn't anything blatant. No kissing, no overly intimate poses. But the way they stood together, the way he looked at her. It was enough. My fingers curled around the edge of the phone. The betrayal hit me all over again, not as sharp this time, but deeper, heavier. I stared at the screen, absorbing every detail. The restaurant they were in. The dress she wore. The smirk on his face. It was taken just weeks ago. He had already moved on long before he walked out that door. I should have been angry. I should have wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, to curse his name. But instead I felt something else. Amusement. Because the more I scrolled, the more I realized something was off. She wasn't just some random woman. She wasn't a fling he had fallen for in a moment of weakness. She was playing a game. Her posts, her captions, the way she interacted with him. It wasn't the behavior of someone in love. It was calculated. Precise. She had been reeling him in for months, and he, in all his arrogance, had taken the bait without a second thought. A slow smile spread across my lips. Oh, my foolish, foolish husband. I closed my phone and leaned back against the counter, exhaling a deep breath. I didn't know what was coming next, but I had a feeling it was going to be interesting. I wasn't going to interfere. I wasn't going to warn him. I was simply going to sit back and watch. But something told me, this wasn't the fairy tale he thought it was. This was a trap. And he had walked into it willingly. I set my phone down on the counter, my fingertips still tingling from the discovery I had just made. A quiet hum of realization settled in the air around me. He hadn't just betrayed me, he had walked straight into something he didn't understand. And I wasn't going to stop him. The night stretched on, but I didn't feel tired. My mind was awake, alive with the possibilities of what would unfold. I wasn't fueled by rage or heartbreak. Those emotions had burned away the moment I realized what kind of woman he had chosen over me. No, this was something else entirely. A detached, almost amused curiosity. What was her plan? I had seen enough to know she wasn't with him out of love. The way she interacted with him online, the subtle but calculated way she had inserted herself into his life. This wasn't passion. It was a strategy. I wondered how long he would last before he started noticing the cracks. The first sign came faster than I expected. 2 days after he left, I was at the grocery store when I spotted one of our mutual acquaintances, Michelle, a woman I barely considered a friend but who knew everything about everyone. She saw me, hesitated for a moment, then made her way over. "Oh my God, are you okay?" she asked, her voice dripping with a mix of concern and barely contained curiosity. I didn't bother playing along. I simply raised an eyebrow. "I'm fine." Michelle leaned in closer, her eyes darting around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Have you heard?" I bit back a smirk. "Heard what?" Her face lit up with the thrill of delivering news. About him and her. They were out at that new rooftop bar downtown last night. Causing a scene. I tilted my head. A scene. Michelle nodded enthusiastically. She was screaming at him. Something about money. It got so bad that security had to step in. I didn't react. Not externally at least. But inside something clicked into place. She had started. It was subtle but I could see the pattern forming. She had baited him in, made him believe she was the answer to everything he thought he was missing. And now, little by little, she was going to pull the rug out from under him. I gave Michelle a polite nod, thanked her for the information and continued my shopping. By the time I got home I found myself laughing again. 2 days. That's all it had taken for the shine to wear off. I wondered how long before he started regretting his choices. The answer came sooner than expected. The following week I got another unexpected update, this time from my lawyer. Not because I had reached out but because my soon-to-be ex had made a mistake. A financial one. Apparently, in his eagerness to start fresh with his mistress, he had failed to realize that our joint accounts were still linked. He had transferred large sums of money, likely trying to impress her, and in doing so had triggered a red flag. My lawyer had already been alerted and now so was I. I didn't touch the accounts. I didn't need to. Because I knew exactly what was happening. She was bleeding him dry. And he was too blind to see it. I pictured him sitting across from her at some overpriced restaurant, proudly handing over his card without hesitation. I imagined the small, knowing smile she must have given him as he paid for every bill, every gift, every indulgence she demanded. Did he think she loved him for him? The thought was almost laughable. By the 3rd week the cracks had deepened. Another source, this time an old friend of his who had never particularly liked me, sent me a text. "You won't believe this, but he's been staying at a hotel." I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "What?" I thought he had his dream life now. The response came almost instantly. "He kicked him out." I exhaled slowly, letting the words settle. It had begun. Whatever illusion he had been living in had shattered. He had thought he was in control, thought he had made the perfect escape, thought she was everything I wasn't. But now he was the one with nowhere to go. I set my phone down and walked to the window, staring out at the evening sky. The weight that had once clung to me in the wake of his betrayal was gone. There was no sadness left, no ache for the life we had shared. Because this This was exactly what he had chosen. And I wasn't going to stop it. Not now. Not ever. He had walked away without a second thought. But karma had a way of making people think twice. And I had a feeling he was just beginning to realize that. The evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of freshly fallen leaves. I stood by my window, staring at the dim glow of the city beyond, my fingers curled around a warm cup of tea. The weight of the past weeks had settled into something calmer now. Less anger, more quiet satisfaction. I hadn't lifted a finger, hadn't uttered a word to interfere, yet the inevitable had begun unfolding on its own. He was losing. The thought didn't bring glee, nor did it make me regret anything. If anything, it affirmed what I had always suspected: what starts in deception, ends in destruction. And he had walked into his own ruin one step at a time. A vibration on the counter broke my thoughts. My phone screen flickered with a message from an unknown number. "You need to see this." Attached was a link. I hesitated for a moment before clicking. It led to a video shaky and grainy, clearly filmed in secrecy. As the footage played, the scene became unmistakable. Him sitting alone at a bar, shoulders hunched, face buried in his hands. The background noise was lively, yet he seemed untouched by it, consumed by something far heavier. And then she entered the frame. Dressed in red, hair flowing over her shoulders, she approached him with a confidence that seemed almost rehearsed. Her lips moved fast, animated, her expression cold, unyielding. Whatever she was saying wasn't soft, wasn't tender. It was sharp, biting. The video zoomed in slightly. He reached for her hand, desperate, but she yanked away as though his touch burned. A few people turned, drawn by the rising tension. His face twisted in something I hadn't seen before. Humility, perhaps even regret. Then she laughed. It wasn't warm. It wasn't kind. It was mocking. And with a final dismissive wave, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving him there, alone. The video cut off. I exhaled, setting my phone down. My pulse remained steady, not a single ounce of pity creeping in. He had chosen her over me. And now he was seeing exactly what that choice meant. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I found my mind wandering. Not toward sadness, not toward nostalgia, but curiosity. How much further could he fall? The answer came 3 days later. A knock echoed through my apartment. Slow, hesitant. I knew before I even opened the door. And there he stood. But this wasn't the man who had left me with arrogance dripping from his every word. This wasn't the one who had threatened, who had belittled, who had walked away believing he had won. This man looked hollow. His once pressed shirts now wrinkled, hair unkempt, the weight of his own mistakes hanging off him like an anchor. There was no confident smirk. No fire in his eyes. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Why are you here?" He swallowed, glancing down at his feet before looking back up. He hesitated as if the words were foreign to him. "I need to talk." I tilted my head, waiting. He cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. She took everything. The confessions spilled from his lips, quiet, almost ashamed. A moment passed. Then another. I said nothing. He searched my face, looking for something. Sympathy, understanding, maybe even a lifeline. I offered none. His hands curled into fists. "I made a mistake." I let out a small, humorless chuckle. "A mistake?" I echoed. "Is that what you call it?" His jaw clenched. "I thought..." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "I thought I was making the right choice. But she..." His voice faltered. "She never loved me. He just wanted what I had. And when there was nothing left, she..." His throat bobbed, words dying out. For the first time in years he looked small. I took in his disheveled state, the exhaustion lining his face. He had built a castle out of lies, only to watch it crumble beneath him. And now, standing in the rubble, he had nowhere to go. I should have felt something. But I didn't. I stepped back, slowly shutting the door. "I hope you find what you're looking for." His eyes widened, panic flashing across his features. "Wait." But I didn't. The door clicked shut. And with it, any trace of the love I once had for him. The door shut with a quiet finality, sealing him out just as he had once so easily cast me aside. I stood motionless, listening. A few seconds passed, then a hesitant shuffle beyond the threshold. He lingered, likely debating whether to knock again, to plead, to force his way back into a life he had shattered. But I gave him nothing. The muffled sound of retreating footsteps filled the silence, each one heavier than the last. I turned away. In another lifetime his misery might have unsettled me. His downfall, his regret might have stirred sympathy, compelled me to open the door to let him explain, to let him unburden himself at my expense. But I had no use for Ghost. Moving through my home I felt something strange settle in. A calmness, an absence of weight. Not relief exactly. Not victory. Just a quiet confirmation of what I had already known. This was where his choices had led him. I walked into the kitchen, hands steady as I reached for a glass, filling it with cool water. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant ticking of the clock. These sounds felt different tonight, sharper, clearer, unburdened by the presence of someone who had once occupied this space but never truly belonged. A vibration against the counter broke my stillness. My phone lit up with a message. Unknown number. It's worse than you think. My pulse remained steady but curiosity tugged at me. I hesitated only a moment before responding. Meek, who is this? The reply came instantly. Unknown number. Let's just say I know what she's doing to him. And it's far from over. Pause. Then another message. Unknown number. Meet me tomorrow. You want to hear this in person. I stared at the screen. Every instinct told me to ignore it, to move on, to let his self-inflicted downfall run its course without interference. But something in me, perhaps a lingering thread of unfinished business, compelled me to reply. Me where? The response was immediate. Unknown number. The cafe on 5th. 2 p.m. I exhaled, setting my phone down. I wasn't doing this for him. I was doing it for me. The next afternoon I arrived at the cafe a few minutes early, scanning the bustling space for any sign of my informant. The place smelled of fresh espresso and baked goods, the warm atmosphere a stark contrast to the reason I was here. A woman in a navy coat caught my attention. Seated near the window, she stirred her tea absent-mindedly, eyes darting toward me the moment I stepped inside. I approached cautiously. I assume you're the one who texted me. She nodded, motioning to the seat across from her. Sit. We don't have much time. I slid into the chair, watching her carefully. There was a tension in her posture, a quiet urgency in the way she glanced around. Who are you? I asked. Her lips pressed together before she sighed. Someone who learned the truth too late. She placed a phone on the table, tapping the screen. You need to see this. I leaned in, my eyes scanning the footage she played. It was another video, this time inside a hotel lobby. He was there, pacing, arguing with the receptionist. His hands moved in frustration, his posture frantic. But what sent a chill through me wasn't his desperation. It was the security guards standing nearby, already alerted, already prepared to intervene. The woman across from me spoke softly. She's setting him up. I looked up sharply. What do you mean? She drained him. First financially, then emotionally. Now she's isolating him completely. She slid a folded paper across the table. That's a police report. She filed a claim against him. Says he threatened her. Says she fears for her safety. I stared at the document, the weight of it settling in. She's making sure that when she's done with him, the woman continued, he has nothing left. No money. No reputation. No way to fight back. I exhaled slowly. And you're telling me this, why? A bitter smile crossed her lips. Because I've been there. I know what it's like to be discarded for her. And I know exactly how this ends. I studied her face, noting the exhaustion in her eyes. A realization clicked into place. You were with him before, weren't you? She nodded, gaze dropping to her tea. He left me the same way he left you. Thought he had found something better. Pause. Then softer, and she destroyed him. I leaned back, considering everything she had told me. She's not just after money, I murmured. She enjoys the power. The woman met my gaze. Exactly. For the first time in this entire ordeal, something unexpected flickered through me. Not sympathy for him, but a deeper understanding of just how dangerous the woman he had chosen really was. But it wasn't my problem. I pushed the paper back toward her. If he's in trouble, that's on him. She nodded slowly. I thought you'd say that. A long silence stretched between us. Then she stood, gathering her belongings. Just thought you should know. As she walked away, I sat there, fingers tapping against the table. The man who had thrown me away was unraveling at an alarming speed. And the worst part? His nightmare was only beginning. I sat at the cafe long after she had gone, the untouched tea in front of me growing cold. The weight of what I had just learned settled deep, but not in the way I expected. There was no triumph, no satisfaction. Just the realization that I had been watching a fire slowly burn out, only to discover it had never been contained in the first place. He was unraveling faster than I thought. And now she was making sure he would never recover. When I finally stood, stretching the stiffness from my limbs, the sun had started to dip behind the buildings. The air carried a quiet hum of the evening rush, honking cars, hurried footsteps, the distant chatter of people heading home. I wasn't in a hurry. There was no urgency to anything anymore. As I stepped outside, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Another message, another unknown number. Check the news. A strange sense of inevitability settled over me. I didn't need to ask which news. I already knew. I unlocked my phone, my fingers moving on their own. A quick search. The first headline made my breath catch. Local businessman under investigation for fraud, ties to money laundering suspected. I stared at the words, unblinking. His name wasn't mentioned outright, but it didn't need to be. The article described a high-profile individual, someone recently involved in financial discrepancies. The pieces fell into place effortlessly. The money transfers. The sudden extravagance. The reckless spending. And now this. I clicked the link, scanning through paragraphs detailing an ongoing investigation, allegations of falsified financial records, missing funds. It painted a picture of a man who had been either careless or corrupt, or both. And the timing was no coincidence. She had orchestrated this. It was a move executed with precision. A masterstroke. She hadn't just taken his money. She had planted the seeds of his downfall long before he even knew what was happening. I leaned against the side of the cafe, exhaling slowly. My hands remained steady, my heartbeat unchanged. I had thought I would feel something in this moment. Vindication. Relief. Maybe even a lingering trace of pity. But I felt nothing. The man who had once stood in my kitchen spitting threats as he packed his bags, was now nothing more than a cautionary tale unfolding in real time. My phone buzzed again. Another message. This is just the beginning. I locked my screen and slid my phone back into my pocket. I didn't need any more updates. I didn't need to know the rest of the story. Because I already knew exactly how it would end. 2 days later, the first image surfaced. It spread across social media like wildfire. Him stepping out of a hotel, disheveled, hounded by cameras. His expression was one of pure exhaustion. A man caught in a storm he had never prepared for. But the most striking part wasn't his appearance. It was the woman walking 2 steps ahead of him. She was smiling. Not at him. Not with him. She was laughing at something on her phone, her eyes sparkling as if she were walking through a dream. Beside her, he looked like an afterthought. A shadow in her orbit. The comments were ruthless. Guess that fairy tale didn't last long. Karma works fast. Wasn't he bragging about upgrading his life just a month ago? For the first time since he had left, his name was everywhere. But not for the reasons he had imagined. The news reports grew harsher with each passing hour. His reputation, once pristine, had become a feeding frenzy for speculation and scandal. There were whispers of lawsuits, of business deals collapsing. And at the center of it all, the woman who had promised him the world, now making sure he had nothing left. It would have been easy to say he deserved it. But the truth was, this had never been about deserving. Some people learn from their mistakes. Others never get the chance. And he was firmly in the latter category. A week passed. The headlines worsened. By the time I finally saw him again, the transformation was complete. I hadn't planned to run into him. I hadn't gone searching. But the universe had a way of making things unfold at precisely the right moment. It happened outside a convenience store. I had stopped to grab a bottle of water, barely paying attention to anything beyond the errand itself. And then, there he was. He didn't notice me at first. He was too preoccupied, his focus on the man behind the counter, fumbling with his wallet. His hands trembled as he counted bills, something I had never seen before. And then, just as he turned, his gaze collided with mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. There was no arrogance in his eyes. No bitterness. No anger. Just the raw, unmistakable look of someone who had fallen so far they no longer knew how to stand. I held his gaze, offering him nothing. No reaction. No acknowledgement of what he had become. And then I walked past him. Because there was nothing left to say. I didn't look back. As I stepped past him, the weight of the moment didn't settle on my shoulders like I had once imagined it would. There was no victorious satisfaction, no moment of triumphant closure. Only a quiet realization that I had long since detached from the man who once dictated the course of my life. The automatic doors of the convenience store slid open behind me, letting out a mechanical hiss as I walked into the cool evening air. I barely noticed the hum of passing cars, the murmur of people going about their routines. My mind had already moved past him, past the hollow figure standing at the register, fumbling with crumpled bills. But the past has a way of lingering. The footsteps behind me were hesitant at first, uneven, as if he were debating whether to follow or let me disappear into the night. I could sense the struggle, feel the weight of his hesitation. And then his voice, raw, unfamiliar. Wait. I didn't. The sound of hurried steps closed the distance between us. He was desperate now, and for the first time, I heard something in his voice I had never heard before. Defeat. Please. The sheer audacity of that word made me stop. I turned slowly, my gaze meeting his. The man who had walked out of my life with his head held high was gone. What stood before me was someone stripped bare, someone who had lost more than he had ever imagined possible. His clothes were the same ones I had seen in the news, the ones he had once worn with effortless confidence. Now they hung loose, wrinkled, as if he had been living in them for days. His face, once clean-shaven and sharp, was shadowed with exhaustion, eyes sunken with the kind of sleeplessness that no amount of rest could fix. What do you want? My voice was steady, unshaken by the wreckage he had become. His throat bobbed. I just... He exhaled sharply, pressing a hand against his forehead as if trying to gather words that no longer came easily to him. I need to talk. I crossed my arms, unmoved. Talk? About what? He swallowed hard, glancing around as though searching for a way to ease the tension, to salvage some sense of dignity. But there was none left. About everything. His voice cracked slightly, but he pushed forward. I know I messed up. I know I made the worst mistake of my life. And I know you have no reason to listen to me, but He hesitated. I don't know where else to go. That admission sat between us, heavier than the silence that followed. I studied him, waiting for the inevitable manipulation, the excuses, the self-serving explanations. But none came. Just a man stripped of every illusion, standing before me with nothing left but regret. And yet it wasn't enough. You should go, I said simply, my voice devoid of any lingering attachment. Whatever you're looking for, it's not here. His expression tightened. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even deserve that. But, he exhaled sharply. I needed to see you. To tell you that I was wrong. I tilted my head slightly. Wrong about what? Everything. The single word felt like an unraveling. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, glancing away for a moment before meeting my gaze again. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought she was everything I wanted. His jaw clenched. She played me, used me, and when I had nothing left to give, she threw me away like I was nothing. His voice dipped lower, raw with humiliation. I lost everything. The business, the money, my name. He let out a bitter laugh. Even my so-called friends vanished the moment I was no longer useful. His eyes searched mine, desperate for something, understanding, maybe even an ounce of sympathy. I gave him nothing. You walked away, I reminded him. You didn't just leave. You destroyed everything on your way out, convinced you were trading up. I know, he whispered. And I was a fool. A part of me had once imagined this moment back when the pain was still fresh, when anger burned deep in my chest. I had thought that if he ever came crawling back, I would relish his downfall, bask in his suffering, let him feel even a fraction of what he had put me through. But standing here, staring at the man who had once held my heart in his hands, I felt no need for revenge. He had already punished himself far worse than I ever could. You were right to let me go, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. You deserved better. And I was too blind to see it. The weight of his confession should have made a difference. Once upon a time it might have. But not now. I took a slow step back. I don't need an apology. I don't need closure. I found my own. His breath hitched, panic flickering across his face. Please, he tried again, voice breaking. Just tell me, is there any way back from this? For a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered he had made this choice. He had burned the bridge. And now he had to live with it. No, I said softly, firmly. There isn't. His shoulders sagged as if the final thread of hope he had clung to had snapped. I turned without another word, walking away, leaving him standing in the ruins of his own making. His world had come crashing down. And for the first time since he left, I truly felt free. I didn't turn around. I didn't hesitate. I walked away with steady, deliberate steps, leaving him standing in the remnants of his own shattered existence. The night air wrapped around me, cool and indifferent, matching the absence I felt toward him. There were no second thoughts, no flicker of doubt. That was supposed to be the end of it. But life has a way of testing your resolve. 2 days later the knock came. I knew it was him before I even reached the door. There was a rhythm to it, not urgent but hesitant. A kind of uncertainty that told me he had debated this moment before acting on it. For a fleeting second I considered ignoring it, pretending not to hear, letting him stew in the silence he had once imposed on me. But something in me wanted to see what desperation looked like up close. I pulled the door open. He stood there, shoulders slightly hunched, a man unrecognizable from the one I had married. His eyes, once filled with certainty and self-importance, now held something far more fragile. Can I come in? His voice was rough, tired. I didn't move. Why? A beat passed. His fingers twitched at his sides, like he was fighting the instinct to shove his hands into his pockets, an old habit of his when he felt exposed. I don't know where else to go. I let the words hang in the space between us. They carried weight, but none of it belonged to me anymore. That's not my problem, I said evenly. His jaw clenched for a moment before he exhaled, slow and measured. I know. I don't expect anything. He faltered, glancing away as if the next words were difficult to admit. I wanted to see you. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossing loosely over my chest. You saw me 2 nights ago. His throat bobbed. Not like this. I studied him. There was no arrogance left, no trace of the man who had once held the power in our marriage. He had been stripped of everything, his wealth, his pride, his illusions. And yet he still thought I owed him something. I shook my head slowly. What exactly do you want from me? His lips parted, but no words came out. He blinked as if even he wasn't sure. And then, so softly I almost didn't hear it, he said, I don't know. That was the moment I knew. He wasn't here for forgiveness. He wasn't here because he had suddenly realized I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. He was here because he had nowhere else to go. It wasn't love. It was survival. And I refused to be anyone's last resort. I straightened, gripping the edge of the door. Go figure it out somewhere else. His eyes flickered with something, panic perhaps, but I didn't give him time to protest. I shut the door. Not with anger. Not with spite. With finality. He didn't knock again. But I stood there for a long while, staring at the closed door, breathing in the certainty that I had made the right choice. I had spent years loving a man who never deserved it. Years believing in a future that had never been real. And for the first time I felt the weight of it lift. There was no more waiting. No more wondering. I was free. The final click of the door closing behind him should have been just another sound, another passing moment, but it settled into the quiet of my home like a statement. Not an end, no, that had already come. This was the aftermath, the moment where echoes faded, and life moved forward unburdened. I turned away, stepping back into my space, untouched by his presence. The air felt lighter, the walls no longer held the weight of old memories. A sense of peace stretched through my limbs, an unfamiliar yet welcome companion. In another life I might have crumbled under the weight of what had just happened. Perhaps there was a time when I would have analyzed every word, dissected his expressions, searched for meaning in the wreckage he had brought to my doorstep. But that time was gone. I had no interest in his regrets. No need for his explanations. His suffering wasn't my concern. That was the real revenge, wasn't it? Not anger. Not cruelty. Just nothing. I moved through the house with quiet purpose, the simplicity of everyday life grounding me. The rhythmic hum of the coffee machine, the sound of water running as I rinsed a cup. These small acts felt significant in their normalcy. I had no desire to dwell on him anymore. Yet the universe had a way of testing resolve. My phone buzzed on the counter, the screen lighting up with a message from an unknown number. "I know he came to see you." I didn't react, just stared at the words. Another message followed. "You're not going to help him, are you?" I exhaled slowly, fingers tapping against the edge of the counter before I finally responded. "No." Seconds passed before the reply came. "Good. Because he's running out of places to turn." I locked my phone without responding, setting it face down as if that alone could bury the remnants of the past clawing at my door. It wasn't my problem. But the truth settled deep in my chest. He was unraveling faster than I thought. And the world wasn't done with him yet. Morning arrived with an eerie stillness. The kind that made you pause, waiting for something you couldn't quite name. I went about my routine as usual, but there was an awareness now, a quiet knowing that lingered at the edges of my mind. By noon another text came. "Turn on the news." I didn't want to. I almost didn't. But curiosity had a way of winning. I reached for the remote, flicking on the screen. The image that greeted me was almost surreal. A press conference. A sea of cameras flashing. A man standing at a podium clearing his throat before speaking. I knew the words before he even said them. "We are officially launching an investigation into financial misconduct. The allegations include fraud, embezzlement, and possible criminal charges. At this time, we are urging all involved parties to come forward." I leaned back, watching as a name finally scrolled across the screen. His name. It was over. Not in the quiet way I had expected. Not in whispers behind closed doors. This was loud. Public. Final. I muted the television, my reflection faintly visible on the darkened screen. I had waited for this moment, hadn't I? Or at least some version of it. The poetic justice of watching him lose everything, of seeing the world turn its back on him the way he had so easily turned his back on me. And yet, sitting here, staring at the confirmation of his downfall, I felt no triumph. Only certainty. This was always how it was going to end. He had walked away, convinced he was untouchable. Convinced he could rewrite his story without consequence. But karma never forgets. And now he was learning that the hard way. That night, as I curled up on the couch, a knock sounded at the door. I didn't move. Didn't even acknowledge it. The silence was my answer. And it was the sweetest revenge of all. The knocking didn't stop. A slow, deliberate rhythm against the wood, followed by a pause. Then another round. As if the person on the other side wasn't quite ready to give up. I remained still. Minutes stretched. The space between each knock grew longer, weaker, until finally silence reclaimed the night. Only then did I exhale. The weight of that moment should have been suffocating. In another time it might have been. But I had nothing left to give him. Not a word, not an ounce of attention. He had made his choices. And now I was making mine. The world outside remained unchanged. The hum of distant traffic, the rustling of wind against the window. Life moving forward, indifferent to the collapse of one man's empire. I turned away from the door. And never looked back. The morning after. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, warming the room with a quiet kind of peace. I woke without the weight of yesterday. Without the lingering shadows of a past that had once threatened to consume me. Padding into the kitchen, I went about the simple routine of making coffee. The rich aroma filled the air, grounding me in the present, in the life I had rebuilt. Not from bitterness, but from the quiet certainty that I had survived. My phone sat on the counter, untouched since the night before. I hesitated, then picked it up, scrolling through unread messages. None from him. Instead, a news alert blinked across the screen. Breaking. Former business executive facing criminal charges. Court hearing scheduled. I skimmed the article. The words blurred together, just noise in the grand scheme of things. His downfall had been inevitable. His mistakes had simply caught up with him. But the difference? It no longer mattered to me. I set the phone down, sipping my coffee as the city outside awakened. The past had no power here. A new beginning. The next few weeks passed in a blur of quiet revelations. Without the constant weight of his presence, life took on a different rhythm. One unburdened by waiting, by wondering, by the exhausting cycle of trying to hold together something that was already broken. I learned to enjoy the stillness. The way mornings stretched without rushed goodbyes, how evenings felt lighter without the undercurrent of tension. Freedom wasn't loud. It was the absence of chaos. It was peace. The last encounter. It was an ordinary afternoon when I saw him again. Not by chance. Not because I sought him out. But because the world is small in the strangest ways. I had stopped at a bookstore, drawn in by the quiet promise of new stories. As I ran my fingers along the spines of novels, I felt the weight of someone watching me. And then his voice. Soft. Almost unrecognizable. You look different. I turned, meeting his gaze for the first time in weeks. He looked different too. Thinner. Tired. A man who had seen the inside of too many courtrooms, lost too many battles. His suit hung looser on his frame, the confident posture of the man I once knew now replaced with something unfamiliar. But that wasn't my concern. I gave him a measured glance. I am different. He nodded, his lips pressing into a thin line. I guess I thought, he trailed off then sighed. Never mind. I tilted my head. You thought what? His shoulders lifted in the faintest shrug. That maybe after everything you'd still care. For the first time in a long while I smiled. Not out of amusement. Not out of malice. But because I finally saw him for what he was. A lesson. A chapter one had outgrown. I tucked the book I had been holding under my arm, meeting his gaze without hesitation. I do care, I admitted. Just not in the way you want me to. A flicker of understanding passed through his expression. And that was it. No dramatic endings. No lingering words. Just two people standing in a bookstore, realizing they had nothing left to say. I turned, walking away without another glance. As I had already won. Not in revenge. Not in his downfall. But in the simple, undeniable truth. I was finally free. I let him walk away without a word, without regret. Because sometimes the best revenge is silence. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something greater. If you've ever been betrayed, if someone underestimated your strength, share your story in the comments. And if you found this journey powerful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that will keep you hooked. The best is yet to come.